Welcome, thank you to our hemp registration webinar. It's the first time we've done one of these, so hopefully you all find it useful. My name is Sunny Summers. I am the Oregon Department of Agriculture's Cannabis Policy Coordinator. We'll be turning the time over to our hemp program, and at the end, I will moderate any questions that you may have. You can type those into the chat box or the question box. I can't remember what it calls it on GoToMeeting, and we will try to do our best to answer any questions you may have. So with that, Tristan, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. This is our first 2021 registration rollout meeting, and we're really excited to have you join us today and to create a great resource for people to go back and look at. First of all, I want to start with introducing our great hemp registration team here and some of the faces behind the scenes that are working hard to get your registrations processed. So I don't know if we want I'd like to have our presenters introduce themselves and where they're located, and then we'll go into the Salem office. So Emily, if you want to start.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm the testing specialist for the hemp program. So I deal with all things testing, pre-harvest, post-harvest, any type of special questions that come up. I'll be presenting later on today too.
Hi, I'm Arden. Hopefully you've talked to me before. I'm a hemp specialist at the ODA. I deal with a lot of the registration process. I do some inspections as well as some testing support.
Perfect. Beth?
Hi, I'm Beth, and I'm working out of the Salem office right now. Normally I've been working out of my home, and I kind of have a lot of hats, but the key ones today are going to be mapping and making sure everyone can make beautiful maps to attach to their applications. And then I also coordinate our inspection program and get all the inspectors lined up. And we'll be talking a little bit about some extra takeaways at the end of today's webinar, just to remind you of some key inspection tips.
Josh?
Yeah, I'll take this off for my introduction. Hi, I'm Josh. I'm the one of the registration specialists, similar to Arden. I kind of help with the beginning of the registration process, as well as some of the more difficult issues that come up. I help consult on, but yeah.
Grace?
Hi, I'm Grace. I'm a registration specialist, and I'm new, and I'm here in the Salem office, and hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions you have eventually.
And then Luz? Oh, Luz, are you muted?
Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Luz Ramirez Tarin. I'm an office specialist too at the hemp program. I will be gathering the information so we can help you process your applications and get it approved.
Perfect, thank you. I'm Tristan Berg. I'm also out of Salem, working from my home due to COVID most of the time. I'm the policy and kind of procedure person behind the scenes that's kind of working on getting all of our pieces working. And I want to thank everybody that's able to join us today and got a chance to meet some of our great staff that are working on our forms. Today, we're going to be able to touch on some of the registration process changes, and I'm going to give you some tips. Then we're going to be moving it over to Arden for some registration form review. He's going to walk you through some of our new forms. Emily will be giving an update on some of the grower testing updates that she has. And then Beth will be sharing some of our great new mapping tools that she developed using ArcGIS, and some updates on the inspection program. First of all, I just wanted to point out that one of the first things that you should be doing before just sending in a hemp registration is making sure that you're checking with your local planning department. That might be the city or the county, depending on what area of the state you live in. You're going to want to make sure that the hemp activities that you're planning are allowed in your area. Can you grow hemp? Is it okay just to put up structures? can you process, depending on the type of activity. You want to make sure that those are allowed within the area that you own or are leasing to perform your hemp activities. Step 2 is also an important one, is you want to check with your local water master. You might think that's odd on a hemp registration, but when you irrigate a commercial crop like hemp, you need to make sure that you have a legal water source. Water is very important in Oregon and we want to protect it. So there are guidelines around using water. So please check with your local water master to make sure you're meeting those requirements. One might be as simple as making sure that you're not planting too close to a water body. Do you have the right water access, and confirm you have water rights? Because it would really be bad if you got your hemp crop in and realize that you don't have water access, and either your crop's going to dry or you're going to spend a lot of money trucking in water. So taking that additional step to talk to your water master in your area will save you a lot of headache along the way. We have the water resource links on the application and in the instructions to make it easy for you to find. Next, I'm just going to talk a little bit about our 21 hemp registrations. We put a lot of time with the hemp team to redesign a fillable PDF to make it easy for you guys to fill out when you're applying for your hemp registrations. A couple of reminders though, once you do a PDF, make sure that you are saving it on your computer for your records, then print it, make sure you sign it, and it gets submitted with your supporting forms. That'll make your registration process go smoother for the Salem office. We're going to have a new tool demo later with our growers. That was a neat feature that was added this year that Beth spent a lot of time developing for you. It'll have a lot of cool features that she's going to demonstrate later. And we also updated our instructions. That should be a better guide for you when applying that you can follow. One of the big things that we are going to be changing for this year is following an incomplete registration process. Last year, our hemp team faced an 80% error rate in applications that were received in the Salem office for registration approval. And anybody doing a business knows that when you have an 80% error rate, what does that do? The first thing it does is slow down the process on getting anything approved and out the door. So we have been instructed by the directors that we need to be following our incomplete application process, which means, what does that mean to you as an applicant? That means that if you send in an application that's incomplete, which means it could be missing information, you filled it out incorrectly, the maps were too dark, we couldn't read the boundaries or the information, your lux might be too light or ineligible, those things would be reasons that would get kicked back. So you need to be watching your email to make sure that you're responding timely to our staff when they're requesting additional information. Because what's going to happen is that if you do not reply back within 30 days after we have reviewed the form for missing information, your application will be rejected, which means that you are going to have to reapply for your hemp license. And at that time, you will have the right, if you're applying in the same calendar year, to reapply that fee that you've already paid toward a new license. But your license will be rejected if you do not meet that 30-day window of getting those changes back. Our hemp staff, many of you probably don't realize, but we have a small team that works on getting those processed. We do bring more people in during registration time, but we want to provide good customer service to you. We want to get your applications and your registration license out to you timely. So that means we all need to work together to get the information that needs to be completed in the applications accurate and complete when sending them in, and timely responding back to us. Because what's going to happen if you don't, then you'll have a rejected application. You'll need to take the time to reapply. And in the meantime, if you are planting or doing hemp activities, you are in violation of our Oregon rules and could look at facing civil penalties. So it's important that we all work together to follow the Oregon rules and that we have before us and get things back timely. Other quick changes and reminders for 21. Our refund policy has been a little loose in the past. We're also tightening up and following our Oregon administrative rules for our refunds, which means that refunds will only be approved under certain situations: a death, misfact, if there was a problem getting your LUX, or licensing or bonding issues. There are some of the exceptions that a refund would be allowed. Otherwise, if you pay the fee just because you don't grow or changed your mind, are no longer acceptable reasons that a refund will be issued. Also, big ones that we're seeing coming in, we have already started getting in 2021 applications, which is exciting, and we're happy that people are finding them on the website. But things that we're already seeing on some of those is that the maps coming in we're not able to read them. So make sure that after you print it, can you read it? And if you're going to fax it, can we read it once again? Because otherwise, the sad thing that happens on those beautiful maps you worked hard on, sometimes they come into our staff to review as black blobs. So take the time to make sure what you worked on is legible. It'll speed up the application process, because incomplete or maps that can't be read will be rejected, and you'll have to resubmit a new map. Also, the handlers. A big one is the LUX application, the land use compatibility statement. If you have not changed locations or business activities at your location, you can resubmit a LUX from past years. But the key on that is that we can read it. If it has been copied multiple times and we can no longer read the activity that's being planned or details on that form, it will be rejected and you'll need to resubmit your LUX application. Or if you're doing anything new from when you've previously submitted that a couple of years ago, please go to your local county and city planner and have them fill out section 2 of a new LUX form. And also a biggie is keep a copy of the application and all records associated with your hemp business. These are pursuant to our Oregon administrative rules. They need to be kept for 3 years past the disposition of a crop. When you have inspectors coming out, if you're selected for an inspection, that will be one of the processes in an inspection, as they will be asking for copies of your records. So keeping a copy of your application is the first step toward record keeping for 2021. Another item I want to point out real quick is that your receipt of proof of payment. If you complete the bottom of your application and request that a receipt is emailed or faxed, that this proof is for payment only. This does not mean that your registration has been approved. It is only for payment only, that your payment has been processed and approved. But you still need to complete and get it approved registration before you will get a license mailed out to you. And that license should be somewhere visible on your property, as far as, in a building. It should be part of your record book. Having a copy of it, that will have your license number on it and is an important part of your record keeping as well. In the past, there was some misinformation. We've changed this with our licensing department, that when you did receive a copy of the proof of payment, that it does say approved across the top, but that is only for the payment. At the bottom, it should now say pending approval of registration, so that it's clear that just because you pay for a license does not mean that you have an approved registration. So hopefully that clarifies some of that for you. Also, our website has a great source of information. We have all of our 2021 hemp registrations and instructions on there. So visit our ODA website. And if you have not looked at our 21 forms and instructions, Take the time to look at those. You'll find a lot of your questions get answered in just looking at our website. And then if you still have questions, we have a great source of people at our ODA hemp program, a part of our registration team, that are standing by to answer questions and are available by email. So those are great resources as you're working through your application, because we want you to submit your application successfully, accurately, and complete the first time. It will help everybody in processing to be able to have the great green stamp of approval versus going back and forth with email, trying to get those clarifications before we can approve. So let's all work to make a successful registration season for 2021. And we want to provide good customer service and help you. So we are a resource whenever you need it. And that's all I have for you. It was just kind of a teaser of what's ahead. If you have any questions, please add those to the chat box and we'll make sure we get those addressed. Otherwise, up next will be Arden, and he's going to be walking through our new forms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tristan. So as Tristan mentioned, all of these forms are available on our website. A short link to get to them is oda.direct/hemp. As you can see here, we have links embedded in the applications themselves. So I highly encourage you to fill out the application electronically so you can utilize these links. If you're old school, you can print it out and fill it out by hand. That's fine too. But I prefer to fill things out electronically for legibility purposes as well. So yeah, I'm going to walk you through these generally, and if you have any questions at all, just pop them in the chat and I will try to answer them. So the first one I'm going to go through is the grower application. So if you're a grower, if you have a grower registration, you're permitted to grow hemp, harvest hemp, store your hemp, and dry your own hemp. So you want to register either your business name, or you can also register your personal name. I am registering under Acme River Hemp Farms, and as much as I want to register Happy Hemp Farms, it's technically not a real business entity unless it is registered with the state of Oregon. So number 4 here, the Oregon Secretary of State registration number, right here, 678912990. It's typically an 8-digit number. There are some exceptions, but if you do not know your number, we have a handy dandy link here that'll take you to the Secretary of State Business Registry database, and you can search your business name here. It will also tell you the answer to number 3, which is your legal status of registrant. So Acme River Hemp Farms in this example is an LLC, but there are over 20 types of businesses that your business might be. Everything from, DBC, which is Domestic Business Corporation, or ABN, which is assumed business name. It's very common that folks don't know what their business type is, so I encourage you to utilize that link and find that out before you submit this application. So if I were a grower last year, I would have a number for number 2. You see it says if applicable. If you were not a grower last year, you would not have a registration number, so you can leave number 2 blank. But as you can see, I was, so I filled it out. So 1 through 4 is typically is just your business entity information. When you move down to 5 and 6, this is about the people involved in your business. So number 5, your key participants. Those are going to be, your owners, your managers, maybe your farmhand. There are 4 spots here, but we do have a continuation form on our website if you need to add more people. I want to point out that only the people listed here are authorized to make any changes on your registration. So keep that in mind. If we're going to be receiving information from someone regarding your application, please put them here so we know that they're authorized to send us that information. Number 6, similarly, this individual, Irina Farmer, is going to be listed on the registration. The printed registration will show this individual's name. So please pick someone that you're comfortable with listing there. Make sure that this email address is active and checked regularly. Make sure there's no typos in it. If I am reviewing this application and I need a revision, that's where I'm sending that email first. So if you've recently submitted an application, make sure you're checking that email regularly so that you can get the information back to us as soon as possible. So then we also added a status of main contact here. So you can list, if you want it to be your consultant or your bookkeeper, you can let us know that. There's also an other line, so you can tell us how the individual interacts with the business. Phone number, mailing address. Please make sure that your mailing address is accurate and up to date. If you've moved, we have forms, again, on our website that you can update this mailing address. We want to be able to get you your registration. Unfortunately, we do get some sent back to the office, so please make sure you're up to date on that. Okay, so then after that is your grow site information. So your grow site is the address where you're growing hemp. I like to think of it as the overall farm or property of which you're growing or leasing, owning hemp. So make sure to give it a name. For some reason, folks don't like to give grow site names. Give it something, memorable that means something to you that you'll remember when it comes up later during sampling and testing. Please fill out the street address, county, city, all of this completely. And the difference between grow site is like your overall property, but then number 8 is your production areas. These are all of the places on your property that you're growing hemp. So all of your fields, all of your buildings, greenhouses, any structures, production areas, they must be contiguous, which just means that they share a common border and they don't have anything, running through them that causes kind of an interruption. So if I had a field that had a road through it or a creek through it, I would have to separate those into 2 fields. Same thing with greenhouses. Each individual greenhouse, each individual hoop house must be listed separately as separate areas in section 8. So area 1 for me is a 15-acre field. As you can see, I've clicked field and I've indicated 15 acres and I've named it Creekside. Please do not choose field and greenhouse. We will send this back to you and request that you separate your greenhouse and your field together. I know it's really easy to click these boxes, but just proofread before you submit it. And then you're going to check what you are intending to grow hemp for. Flower and biomass is what I'm using this field for. And I'm only going to harvest this field 1 time. And okay, what else? The GPS coordinates. I'm not going to go too deep into GPS and mapping since Beth will go through it momentarily. But I want to mention that you should be taking your GPS coordinates from the center of your production area. So on my mapping tool, I'm going to find my Creekside field and I'm going to choose the exact center as close as I can get to center and record those GPS coordinates on my application. Each of your production areas must have unique GPS coordinates. Even if they're very close together, they cannot be identical. Same thing goes for the names. They can't have identical names. So area 2 is greenhouse. I'm naming it greenhouse 1. I've only clicked greenhouse. It is 2,500 square feet. and I am growing for biomass here. I wanted to point out that we also have a new section for hemp seed and propagation. If I were growing for seed in this greenhouse just for myself to use later in subsequent years, I would hit this self-use box. If I were growing seed to sell to other people, I would hit other. And that actually requires another registration application. In this scenario, greenhouse 1, I intend to start my seeds there. So I'm going to start my seeds, propagate them, and then I'm going to transport those seeds to my Creekside field. So I've hit propagation self-use. And I'm also then going to use greenhouse 1 to grow to maturity. And I'm going to do that twice. So that's what I've indicated here by the harvest. I'm going to harvest twice in 2021. So overall, that's how you're going to approach a production area which you will utilize for multiple purposes more than once. That's how this reads. This is new, so I just wanted to go over that with you all. Okay, GPS coordinates, same thing. Please take them from the middle of your greenhouse. All right, area 3, I have a second greenhouse, same size. I'm growing for flower, and I'm only going to harvest it once. GPS coordinates again. Oh no, I actually have another greenhouse that I want to utilize. So I'm going to go to the ODA website, and I'm going to download the production area continuation form. I'm going to show you an example of that right now. One moment. Having a technical difficulty here. Okay. I believe I have worked out that kink. Sorry about that. So I have a second field that I want to register at Big Meadow Grow Site. So I have downloaded this production area continuation form to include my 5-acre field. Again, the top here is your grow site information. So the name of your grow site, the address again, and then as many, you can use this for as many areas as you need to. If you have 100 greenhouses, that's fine, but you will need to list each one of them and give us all of this information. So I have one more 5-acre field I'm naming Hilltop, using it for flower and biomass, harvesting it once, and those are my GPS coordinates. And then I want to show you the map that you will need to provide with all of these areas outlined and labeled. So let's take a look at that. So here is my Big Meadows grow site. I have labeled it with the grow site name up top. I have outlined the entire grow site using this dashed line here, and I have outlined and labeled with names each of my production areas: the Creekside, Hilltop, Greenhouse 1, and Greenhouse 2. Okay, so back to my grower application. I am done with my production area information. I'm moving on to number 9. And this is where I'm going to tell the department if I plan on drying my hemp or storing my hemp somewhere else other than my grow site that I'm registering. This is important because at the ODA, we will get inquiries from law enforcement or other folks about, maybe, oh, there's a hemp barn over here. And if it's not at your grow site, we won't know that you're storing your hemp there unless you let us know. So, please utilize this. Let us know. It's mostly for you, to cover you, and not necessarily something we need, but I encourage you to do so if you have that information. So next, I'm going to report what I grew last year. Number 10, last year I grew 40 acres and I harvested 5,000 pounds of hemp. And this is dry weight. I weighed my hemp once it was dry. So please make a note of that. That's how we want you to report that. Number 11 is the water resources that Tristan touched on. This is new this year. We also have this link embedded so you can find out more on water use permits and get in touch with our water resources department. In my example, I am using surface water and I have a permit for that, and this is my permit number. Okay, number 12, please don't breeze through this. Please read each bullet point. Your signature is proof that you have read each of these and that you understand and agree all the requirements as a grower. Your fees, I just want to touch on this real quick. You will pay the grower fee, the $250 fee one time. The grower fee is basically just to register yourself as an individual or your business name. And then the grow site, the $500 fee is per address. So per property that you're growing on. So if I had 3 farms, but this was my first application, I would pay $750 total. And then my next 2, I'd only pay $500 each time. And this is where you want to send them. Check a money order, credit card. Cannot stress this enough. Please do not email us your credit card information. If you're going to pay by credit card, you're going to fill this area out. We get a lot of emails, and if we ask you to send us a revised application, please make sure that you black this out or delete this page completely when you send us the application. Okay. I think that covers my growers for now, and I'm going to move on to the seed application since I sort of touched on that already. Okay. So Smith Hemp Seed is applying for a seed application because they're growing seed and they're going to produce seed to sell to other handlers and growers. So they fill this out. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's straightforward. Pretty much just your business information and contact information, and then your acknowledgement and signature. And I want to note that the seed application cannot stand alone. You cannot only get a seed registration. You must be a grower or a handler to receive a seed registration, and the fee is $500. Again, please do not email us credit card information. Red, bold, underlined, please. The next main registration type is a handler registration. I'll go through this with you. Yes. So a handler registration is for processing hemp. So taking raw hemp biomass and turning it into a hemp item or hemp commodity. This includes trimming. So if you're taking, as a grower, you are allowed to harvest your hemp, which also includes like bucking and shucking. But once you start manicuring that flower and making a retail ready product, you must have this handler registration. The handler backbone is the LUX, the land use compatibility statement that Tristan spoke about just earlier. If you do not have an authorized LUX, that is step one. You're going to want to make an appointment with your city or county planning department and make sure that you get that in order first. I will jump ahead to the LUX just to show you what it looks like. So please read this page. It gives you a lot of information about what a LUX is and when you might need a new one, how to complete it. This is what it looks like, and you're just gonna fill out section 1 for this. So you can fill out section 1 before you go to the county. Your business name, contact name, all of this information. The tax lot number and the latitude, longitude. If you don't know your township range, all of this information, the county or city will, so they'll help you with that. I want to stress that the business name must be the same on your LUX as it is on your registration application. So if I am registering under my personal name, my business name must have my personal name, not my LLC. If I have a LUX from last year, but I actually changed my entity, that means I'm going to need a new LUX, unfortunately. So fill out a new one and bring it down to your county. Okay, I'm going to go back up top. This beginning handler information is very similar to the growers. Same business name, business entity information, LLC, my business registry number here. My key participants, these are the folks that can make changes to my registration and their phone numbers and titles. My main contact and an email, mailing address, and then the handling information. This is where I'm actually doing my hemp processing activities. This address here, that has to be the same address as listed on this LUX right here. Okay. So once I fill that out on my application, number 8 is my end of year commodity report. So last year I processed 1,000 pounds of flour and 5,000 individual pre-rolls. We get a lot of applications that don't have the unit of measurement for the amount produced, so please make sure that you're including that. So if you just write pre-rolls and you put 5,000, we don't know if you mean 5,000 packages, 5,000 individual, 5,000 pounds. So please make sure that you include that information. Also, if you did not process, you must check this box. Again, please read through all of the acknowledgments that you're signing and put a date there. The fees, you only pay A or B. We tried to add a little blurb here under number 10 because it was causing enough of an issue that we needed to address this. So I am choosing the first one, letter A. for $1,300 because I am just a standard handler. If I were a marijuana processor with an active license with the OLCC, I might register for reciprocity. The only way that you can qualify is if you have that processor license with a hemp endorsement from the OLCC. Then you could choose the second one. You do not need to pay for both. Please don't pay $1,800 for handlers. Again, this is where you send your check or money order, credit card. Do not email credit card information to us. Okay. And I want to touch on this Lux once again. So this is all my personal information here, my location. And then number 2 is where I'm going to describe exactly what I'm doing. So please be, as specific and as descriptive as you can be. Some of the definitions that your county or city might not consider what you're doing to be processing, but the ODA does. So just be sure to include everything you're doing. If you're packaging, if you're trimming flour, if you're doing oil extraction, this is a very big box, so you can write as much as you need to. And then from there, section 2 is going to be filled out by your planning official. So you can leave this blank, and this is for them to fill out. And they need to approve it. Otherwise, we cannot approve your registration. So number 5 must say yes. And they might have some notes here for us. If they give you any supplemental findings or paperwork, please attach that to this Lux. That's written down here. Written findings of fact must be attached to this Lux. And they will give you a signature and a date. And you will need to attach this Lux to your application in order for us to process it. So please do not leave it out. If you have one from a previous year and nothing has changed, your activities haven't changed, your address, your business name, we can accept Luxes from a previous year. Okay. So that is all I have. And I believe I am passing it off to Emily.
Well, the disembodied voice is going to jump on. And actually, this is funny. We're going to have you and Tristan answer a couple of questions before we move on.
Sure.
So Tristan, if you want to jump back on. The first question that we received is, if we need to change the person of contact on the Lux, does that mean we should redo our Lux? Location and activity has not changed, and it's unclear if this is required.
Sure. Any changes that are made to a Lux must have authorization. So you can't just cross out anything you want. It's a legal document. So if you need to change the contact person, just have the planner initial it. They might even accept it over email and initial it and send it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Last year, I was able to pay for an application with American Express. Can I do so again this year?
Tristan, do you know that answer?
No, it's the forms that are down below on the application. So I don't think American Express is offered. We would have to do a different type of box at the bottom if people are wanting to pay with American Express, because it is set up in a format not allowing American Express.
Okay, so maybe call the office for more information if that's the only route.
Right.
Okay.
We can set up a revised payment application.
I use Google Maps, and both years that I emailed them, they end up unreadable on your end. It's not because the map is poorly executed. So both years I have needed to email maps separately. So I think maybe they faxed them and then we end up with a bad copy. Can one of you address that?
Yeah, unfortunately, that fax machine it does darken things. You might, with our new mapping tool, it offers different colors, so there might be a way around that. Unfortunately, if it is dark, we will send you an email, but if you save that map to your computer, it should be pretty easy to just attach it and send it to us directly.
Yeah, sending it as an attachment in the email would definitely make the quality better than trying to fax any map.
If I have 2 contiguous properties, do I need to submit 2 applications?
No. If it is a contiguous grow site, one application is fine.
So what is the reasoning for how many times we're planning on harvesting?
I think the question is, why did we add that? So that we can account for all of the hemp being grown there. So if I had for example, if I had a greenhouse that I was using in March and it was going to mature, and I was going to harvest that, I want to get that testing done. And if I'm going to use the space again, then I'm going to have to get testing done again. So it's just for us to be able to track how many test reports to expect from that area.
Exactly, and it also helped the inspectors when they're planning site visit appointments.
Right. Okay. Will you please talk more about identifying the grow site? Many farms don't have street addresses associated with bare ground. How do we determine when multiple grow sites are needed?
That's a good question. Typically, if there's no address, there's a lot of farm area in Oregon that doesn't have an address. You can put the tax lot number, and that should be helpful. Some folks also put the nearest street intersection. Sometimes that helps us. I also encourage you to get in contact with your local planning department because they might have an address for you that you didn't know existed.
Yeah, that has happened. Okay, thank you. Can an area be added after an application has been accepted?
Yes. There is. I didn't pull up those forms. We have a lot of forms on our web page. One of them is called a change form. And if after you registered and you decide that you want to utilize an extra field or you have some new structures that can be used, you can use the change form to add production areas, and you can use the change form to remove production areas. So the same thing goes for, if I have a 40-acre farm and I register all 40 acres, but then it turns out that I can only do half, I can use that change form to update the ODA with the new size.
Okay.
And those
you have
are
multiple-
very important as we move into testing and inspection time that we have current records.
If you have multiple addresses, do you have to register multiple applications or can you use a continuation form?
If it's a contiguous grow site, it can be one, but if it's, in Eugene and then Roseburg, that's going to be 2 separate. I think that answers the question.
Yeah. Can I hire someone who has a handler's license to come to my property to trim? Am I required to get a copy of their handler's license?
The processing needs to happen at the location that the Lux is for. So there's no like mobile trimming that unless it is in a zone that is allowed to do so. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, there's no mobile trimming in hemp. The Lux requires that you be licensed for each location. Okay, what if we were registered in 2019 but not 2020? We want to reinstate in 2021.
That's fine. We don't really do renewals, so every year you're basically reapplying.
I think we kind of addressed this one, but if I have 2 hemp handling locations in different counties, do I need to submit 2 handler applications?
Yes, per address.
Yeah. Can we electronically sign this, or does it need to be signed on paper?
I think electronic is fine.
Yeah, if we have the actually, we didn't really address that, but we can update records to say that that would be, I mean, if there's a way to authorize that, yeah.
Okay. What about machines? Is that processing and then I need a handler's license?
Yes, a trimming machine is still considered trimming.
Is there a fee charge for using a credit or debit card?
No.
What, if any, application would need to be filed if your business brokers hemp deals, i.e. biomass?
This is so. This is a tough. This is kind of a gray area. So if you don't take possession of the hemp, you don't need a registration.
Right. So we can email in an application, sorry, so we can mail an application and then email maps separately.
I would attach the maps when you mail or fax, and then keep a copy if you do need to email, because it's going to be really hard for us to track between what we're getting by fax and then try to connect it with our email. So I would just have it handy in case we need to reach out to you.
Okay, so we'll take 4 more questions and then move on with the presentation. Our dryer is owned by a different entity than the registered grower. The grower is using the dryer to dry the hemp. Do we need to have a handler license for the grower and the landlord?
So if you are drying for other people, what we call commercially drying, you would need a handler, yes. A grower can dry their own, but once you start drying for other folks, then that's when you need the handler registration and the Lux.
Okay. And just going back to the brokering question, what constitutes possession?
Sunny, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I would say if you're physically taking possession, I don't care if on paper it says that you own that plant material, but if you're actually storing it and warehousing it yourself before you turn around and sell it to the next step in the process, then you would need to have a registration with ODA. But if all it is a paperwork exercise to move it from one company to another, but you're not actually physically storing it, we would not require you to have that registration. Okay, couple more. If we grow plants from seed but only for one crop, do we need to add that as another area?
If you grow plants from seed but only for one crop. So if you're propagating in your greenhouse, you would just put, greenhouse 1 and then check the seed self-propagation. I think that's the question.
Okay. I have a dirt driveway through the middle of my field. Do I need to report 2 different fields?
Not if it is a small,
Like a farm access road?
So if it's like unpaved and it's just sort of like a small dirt road to like move your equipment through or whatever, then no. But if it is a driveway or even a small street that other folks use, then yes.
Yeah, they're saying it's a driveway to their house.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, and then last question for now. We will get to the other questions that are on there. But last question for now before we move on. If I have not decided on my grow site yet, can I just do the grower registration and then register my grow sites once I decide on that?
That is a great question. Yes, and please remember to, because there were people that didn't send us grow site after they registered as a grower. But this is a perfect opportunity to mention that if you grew in 2020, but you still have crop, left over that you tend to sell into 2021, you definitely need the grower 250 registration. If you're not growing at all in 2021, that will suffice for you to do your hemp activities with your 2020 crop without registering a grow site.
Okay, thank you. We will, like I said, get to those other questions, and now we're going to move on to Emily.
Okay, can everyone see me? Let's see.
Yes.
I don't know about everyone, but I could.
Okay, I can't. Oh, there, it popped up. All right, technology. Okay, thank you, Arden. That was a very comprehensive overview. I'm going to briefly go over the testing requirements for growers. I want to have put an emphasis on what the responsibilities are if you're a registered grower relating to testing. So first and foremost, you as a grower are responsible for making sure that an accurate and representative pre-harvest sample and test is completed for all of the production areas registered to you. So every area that
Emily?
you register. Yeah.
If you're intending for us to look at a screen, we can't see it. We just see you right now.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. Okay. So every area that you put on your application that you're registering, we're going to be expecting a test result from. So that's really important to keep in mind, and that's kind of why we put that propagation area there. So we'll know what areas hemp is going to be grown to full maturity. So we'll know what areas exactly to expect a test report for, but you are responsible for making sure that that's completed. Also, it's a requirement that you use an ORLAP accredited and OLCC licensed laboratory. I've included a link here to a list on our website. So be sure to choose a lab from that list when you're wanting to get your pre-harvest test done. You're also required to ensure that our program receives all of the necessary paperwork for that testing. So each area should have 3 forms that we're going to be needing. So one is the sample request form, and that's the form that you fill out and send to the lab to request testing. The next is an on-site sampling form, and that's what the lab fills out while they're there at your property sampling. And then lastly is an ODA hemp pre-harvest THC report. This report is different than a COA, and for those that don't know, a COA is a certificate of analysis that the laboratories usually give to growers after their test is completed so that they can see like the breakdown of their cannabinoid profile. But all I'm looking for a pre-harvest test report is the THC content, and that's listed on an official report. So make sure that we have all 3 of those documents and you have all 3 of those documents for each production area that you're growing hemp to full maturity on. I also wanted to note that it might be beneficial for you to have a contract in place with the laboratory that you choose should any problems arise with that laboratory. And okay. I wanted to briefly go over kind of what to expect when you're doing a pre-harvest test. So you'll pick your harvest date. That's always a good thing to do. And the reason why I say pick your harvest date is because your hemp must be sampled no more than 28 days before you harvest. So What that means is when a sampler comes out to your property and takes a sample, you have 28 days from that date to start your harvesting of that area. So it's important that you remember that time frame. And like I said, you'll send that sample request form to an accredited lab and arrange a date for the sampler to come out and sample the grow site. The next step is they'll come out, they'll take their sample, and you'll receive a test result from the lab. That's a good time to ensure that you got all 3 of the documents that you need and that we receive those as well. So sometimes the lab will CC your email when they email us the test results, or sometimes you'll get an ODA report, and so typically that means we received it. But it's always a good idea to check that, and you can do that by just sending a quick email to the hemp program. If your harvest lot passes, you can harvest and transfer that area to a handler for further processing. Next, I want to go over some common questions that I get. One question I get a lot is, what is considered a passing result for a pre-harvest test? And does the pre-harvest test only measure Delta-9? So a passing result for a pre-harvest test is anything equal to or below 0.34, because we do allow for rounding down to 0.3, which is the limit. So anything at or below 0.34 is considered passing, and anything at or above 0.35% total THC is considered failing. If you fail, we'll be sure to work with you through your options, because you do have some options there. But effective January 1st of this year, the pre-harvest test measures total THC, not just Delta-9. So every pre-harvest test you're getting from that point on is going to be for total THC. Another question I get is, I'm only growing for seed and I'm not retaining the flower. Am I exempt from getting a pre-harvest test? So all hemp growers, regardless of what you're growing for, are required to get a pre-harvest test done on that material. So even if you're not going to take that flower, you still need to get a pre-harvest test done, and you still need to pass that pre-harvest test in order to harvest that material and retain any seed from it. Another question I get is, can I have all of my hoop houses sampled and tested together as one area? So the answer to that is no, because you can't combine the production areas for testing. So when you list your production areas out on your registration application, you cannot combine those all for testing. They need to stay the same as how you registered them. And the last question, my hemp is covered in mold and not salvageable. What do I do? So the answer to that would be to fill out a crop loss form, and those are available on our website. And you have to do that within 48 hours. So keep that in mind should you have that issue this year. That was brief, I know, but if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. We also have a lot of really great resources and recorded webinars on our website. So be sure to check those out. If you need specific advice, or if you have questions now, go ahead and put them in the chat box and I can answer them.
Okay, we're going to switch over to Beth Myers-Shania, and then we'll come back for questions. We hear you, Beth, but you're muted.
There we go. I'm going to be doing the mapping on a bigger screen that's right in front of me, so I apologize if I'm not looking right into the camera when I'm talking you through this mapping, but hopefully you can all see my screen. Can you verify, anyone else out there, that you're seeing my Firefox window here? I don't have a map up yet. Okay, good.
Yes.
So what I've done here is paste in the address bar the quick link to this mapping tool. It will be also on the application, so you can find it there. So it's a short link, oda.fyi/hemp hemp map tool. And there are some capitalizations here, but that's just to kind of pop out the words to make them a little more memorable. It doesn't really matter if you capitalize when you enter it in. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit return so we can go right to this tool. Okay, and this is what you see when you first land at the tool. And I'm doing this after Arden's talk about how to fill out the application, but it's actually a very good place to start. Your process is to start here because we will be going through how to get a correct latitude, longitude, and the correct area for your production areas. So good place to start, map first, and then you can take down some of that info as you go. So over here in the upper left, there's a round icon that's the lowercase I. You want to open that to get all the instructions that I'm going to be walking you through right now. So hopefully they're easy to follow. I appreciate any feedback if you think something could be improved in the directions here. So far, we've had some good luck with applicants who've already sent in their application. So the first step, well, we'll go over kind of what this tool can help you with. You're going to be able to draw the outlines around your grow site and production areas, and then you'll be able to label them clearly. And you'll also be able to calculate the acres of a production area or the square feet if it's an indoor covered grow. And then you'll be able to find the latitude and longitude of the center of those production areas. So the first step in the instructions here, I'll scroll it so it's right at the top, is we just got to find the grow site. And I live in Silverton, so I'm just going to use the Silverton High School grounds as my test here. So let me zoom in. I'm going to kind of keep Silverton right here in the middle as I zoom, 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 zoom. A few clicks. You have to use this this plus minus to do your zooming. If you, depending on what mouse you have, you might be able to do something a little fancier. But I'm going to scroll again here to Silverton and get close to where this high school property is. So you just need to get the grow site centered right in the middle. And that I clicked in one too far because I'm not going to be able to quite see everything. So I'm going to back out another level. And this part of the property is what I'm going to call the grow site, where the school is and the ball fields are. And then the key part here is to go over to start is to use this little artist palette tool and pop it open. And you'll start to get some options of what to put on your map. Luckily, this thing popped right over the top of my production areas, some of them, but you can move it wherever you need to get it out of the way. So I'm going to kind of move it over here down in this lower corner. And even if I needed to move my map away from center for a little bit to get a better draw, after I'm done drawing, I can still move it back to the center again. And then the first thing I want to do is outline the entire grow site. So I'm going to select this zigzaggy line tool, which will let me add some corners to the line that I'm going to use. Once I select it, then it gives me a preview of what's already chosen here. And this is where we're going to choose the width or the style of line in this first box. Let me move this back up so it's a little more in the center. And so I'm going to outline the grow site in a dashed line. Well, let's see, I'm just going to keep it, I have a choice. I can choose some of these pre-selected ones, but since I'm going to change the color to white, and the color choosing in this is kind of funny, but you're going to get this box with a whole range of shades of the default color. But if I just go up here to the upper left, it'll turn, I'll get a very white light color. So for most of you that are going to be faxing your maps in, it's really important that you choose a white outline. And we can vary the widths of the outlines to show the difference between a grow site and a production area. So now I'm going to click over again and choose the style, and I'm going to say dash. And we want this to be opaque, so I'm not going to mess with this transparency. So now I should be able to just start clicking along, there we go, this map. And I've already decided, I think I'm gonna just undo this one because I want to change that width. I forgot to scroll down to change the width. So I want this one to be a thicker line so it really shows up, especially if I'm faxing it. So I'm going to go up to 5. Now I'm going to go back up, just make sure that's selected, and we'll see if that outline looks a little more solid. There you go. And you could even go bigger than this. And I'm just going to say that the grow site encompasses all this part of the property here. Click there so I can make another corner. Sometimes it wants to take a second to stick. Okay, and then it says double click to complete. So once I've double clicked, I have an outline of my grow site completed. And I just used all these different tools to make it look exactly like I wanted. If you are going to be, for sure, printing your map on a color printer and then mailing it in, you can use a variety of colors to differentiate the grow site and the production areas. Okay, so now I'm going to go back. I still have this tool selected, and if I move my cursor out, it already says click to start drawing, but I'm going to be changing the width and the style. So I'm just going to go back to a solid line, and I am going to make this one a little bit narrower so you can tell that I'm outlining something different. We're going to outline production areas now. And now that I've got the width, I still have the light color that will show up well on black and white printing or faxing. And I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to call this baseball field, its own production area. So I'm going to start drawing that line, click, up, another corner, and back down. And I'm going to double click, and it's there. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I didn't quite get those lines joined, but that's okay. As long as it is a really good representation of where your field is. Now I'm going to do another production area right here with this field. So it's ready to go. I'm still using this same line structure because these are all production areas. So I'm just going to start clicking again. Now these are completely separate production areas because they're non-contiguous. There's a whole walkway separating. They're a little bit kitty corner, but they're not really contiguous. There's a building here. Let me double click. So I have 2 production areas outlined now that are fields. These would be outdoor grows. Then we're going to pretend that these tennis courts are greenhouses, and we're going to say that 2 of these greenhouses are for producing, and they're going to be separate production areas. So even, and I could zoom this map in a little bit if I needed to pause and zoom in to get a better outline around these areas. That would be easy to do. So there I've double clicked. I could go up here and do zoom in just for drawing this a little bit better. So now probably need to go back to it after I zoomed in. I need to re-click that line. As long as this zigzag line is outlined, you should be ready to go in drawing. And so I'm going to put another one right here. We'll say these 2 are my greenhouse production areas. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out so we can see that overview a little bit. So we have 2 production areas outdoor, 2 production areas indoors, and we need to just label them so that it's clear on the map, and the labels on the map match the names that you gave them on your application. So we're going to just choose now this text icon instead. You can see the font color here is black, but I think it will be better again in white. So I'm going to click up in this upper left corner of this swatch of color that opened up and get it to be pretty close to white. And I'm going to type the text. It's going to be hard to tell exactly what the right size of letters will be yet, but we're going to call this one baseball 1. As soon as I type it, when I take the cursor over, wherever I click, those words, those letters that I just typed in that text box will appear. And that looks like it's a good size. If they were way too small or way too big, then you would click undo and you would change the size. So I'll make this one a little bit bigger, maybe 25 font, and see what that does. When I click again, I'm actually going to make sure I have that's entered in. by clicking out of the box for a second. There, that one's a little bit big, so I'm going to undo it. I'm going to go back to 20 and use the 20 size font. When I click now, it should fit right inside there again. Now all I have to do, my next one I'm going to call Baseball 2, so it's easy for me on this map. Now that I've clicked in Baseball 2, that's what should appear when I click in the middle of this. Now these little tiny greenhouses, I don't think we want to put any teeny tiny little font in there because it's going to get completely garbled, but we have the option to draw some arrows. So let's just use an arrow to point our way out. Oh, it looks like I'm getting the wrong size again. I'm going to go undo that because I want to get my colors right. Let's get the color back out to bright. And I'm gonna maybe make this a little skinnier of an arrow since I have skinny little greenhouses. And I'm also gonna make sure the outline color. You have two options, what's going to be inside the arrow and what's going to be outside the arrow. So you can play with those a little. If it doesn't come out exactly right, you can change those outline and interior colors. Okay, so now I should be able to just start in the greenhouse, but then move it up. I think this field is going to be a great spot for me to put some letters to put where these are. And I think on the next one, just because I can see how wide that still looks, I'm going to make the next one even narrower so they fit well side by side. And I'm going to kind of stagger them, or maybe even put this arrow pointing out here a little, so I have room for both of those words. Now I need to go back up to the text, click on the text again. We've already got the same color, so we're doing good there. And I'm just going to be simple here. I'm going to call this GH1 and click right above this first arrow. And I'm going to undo it because I want it to be a little closer. And then I'll change it to Greenhouse 2 or GH2. And this is exactly the way it would be if you're abbreviating it to GH for a greenhouse on your application, then that's what you need to put here. If you are abbreviating it here, it should match. So if I really had spelled out greenhouse, I'd need to make sure I could put the words greenhouse itself and not GH1. You can't abbreviate differently than what you have on your application. So now the mapping is pretty complete. Again, if you're faxing in, you might want to make these outlines even a little more robust so they can show up against that darker image that usually comes through on our fax machine. And as Arden said, if you've done your best and the fax machine just can't get it, you'll get contacted by a registration specialist who you'll be able to connect with directly to just email just your map in. But you don't want to email your map in without have it requested of you, or it's really hard to track it back to your original application. So now that we're done with that part, I can close. We've labeled everything that we need to label, and we've drawn all the outlines. So we're done using this outline, grow site, and production area instructions. And we've done the labeling of the instructions, and everything that I just went through is all spelled out here on the left-hand side. So now we're going to work on calculating what you have here so you can fill out those portions on your application. We're going to start by opening up the ruler now, because we are basically taking measurements of things, measuring where something is and how big it is. And these three little icons here are what help you change. We're only going to be using the first one, which is the area tool, the area measurement tool, and the last one, which will help us measure the lat long. So let's measure the area of our two fields. As soon as I click it, it highlights kind of gray. And over here, we get a drop-down menu that lets us choose what units we need this record to be in. And we need acres for an outdoor grow. So I'm going to leave it at acres. And I'm just going to re-outline. This line is not going to stay on my map. It's only for the purposes of measuring. And then even as I'm going, it starts to add up what acreage I've got. I'm going to double click. And now you've got the acres. And if you're filling your form out electronically and you've got it open in another window, you can just copy that and paste it right in. So this one's 2.2 acres. I'm going to guess that this one is a little bit longer, a little bit bigger. but I'm going to clear that one. I still have this grade, so it should just start measuring for me again. And be patient if these lines don't like to stick. Oop, I'm having a lot of problems. There we go. I'm going to undo because something was clear. Something was lagging. Maybe I'll turn this back on and turn it back off and on. There we go. Always has to be a little ghost in the machine, I guess. Okay, and that one's 3.32. So that's what would be recorded for the production area baseball 2 on your production area of your application. To go into the greenhouses, we're gonna go back to, I'm just kind of using my mouse to zoom, using the plus to zoom in a little so I can actually measure these areas more precisely. And I'm going to open up that same area tool, but now it's an indoor, we're pretending these were greenhouses, so we need to have this in square feet. So change the units to square feet for indoor or covered grows, and let's see how many square feet we get for greenhouse 1. Double click. That one is a 5,325. You could round that up to 26. I don't think we need the decimals in feet in the feet measurement there. So that's what you would record for this greenhouse as the area. I'm going to clear that one. Let's see if we can get this to work right off the bat the second time. Oh, I think I'm just going to turn it off and turn it back on again. Being there. Little pro tip there, I guess you might need to do that. And double click, and that one came out 54. If you know that the greenhouses are exactly the same size, it's okay if you use one and then enter the same square footage, because really my outlines here weren't right on for both of them. But that does make sure that you've got an accurate representation of the size of your greenhouse. So you're going to record that. So now that you've done making those recordings, I can clear that before I closed it. You noticed I closed this window, but I actually didn't clear it, so my little measurement line just stayed on the screen. I'm going to zoom back out, and we're ready to make a PDF copy of this map that can be printed. So I'm going to, again, center this right in the middle. You might have to end up trying this process of capturing your map a couple of times to make sure it shows up in the end map right. Hopefully we've got it right the first time here, but the tips are really making sure you've got a good allowance around the outside edge of what you want printed and that you've got it centered. And then you'll most likely get it right the first try. So now we're going to go back up to where these icons are. We opened up the instructions using the eye icon, and now we're going to go to the printer. And even though it shows a printer, this process isn't going to directly just print a map. It's going to create a PDF. And I can put the title here. I think it's a great idea to just title this map the title of your grow site. So my grow site's name is Beth's Grow Site. This is already defaulting to a portrait or an up and down version of a map. It's probably the best one to default to if your grow site orients more north and south than east or west. If it orients east or west, then you'll want to look for the other one that's similarly named but says landscape and choose it instead. But this one is definitely going to show up better on a portrait orientation map. And we want a PDF. I think this is going to be the best product for you to print and send. So now that I've got all those filled in, all I have to do is click print, and now it will say it's creating a print. So it's creating the PDF. And now that it's done that, I need to actually click on this result, and it will ask me how I want to open it. I'm going to try opening with Firefox directly. Normally I would say save file and save the PDF and keep it with my other records so it's ready to go with that application. But I think if I choose open with Firefox, it'll be easier for you to see the result more quickly than me having to open Adobe. So let's try that. Yes, that's much better. Okay, I'm going to zoom it out, and you can see the result, this lovely map that has the title at the top that I gave it. It's got all of the components that we needed there, and well contrasted. It's important if you decide you want to use some color because you have a color printer, it still needs to contrast well with this satellite imagery background that's showing. And then there's some kind of nifty little measurement lines and the date and time you printed it there as well. So it's just ready to go. Sunny, do we want to pause here for questions specifically on mapping before I kind of just do the final takeaways about inspection?
We don't have any specifically about mapping, so go ahead and I apologize to folks, we're running a little bit over.
Okay, so this is just, I have one slide here that I want to dive back now that we've done mapping. I am a hemp inspector as well as doing this mapping stuff and to help coordinate the hemp inspection staff on where they're going to go and where they're needed. But there's some really key stuff you need to know about how you're operating so that you're doing it all within the rules and you can slide through without any issues. Hopefully, you might see us if you're doing a great job because you might be selected for a random inspection. You might be selected because you were kind of red flagged. Maybe because of an issue you had last year and we just want to make sure you've taken care of that issue and you're back on track. But the first point I have here, I kind of jumped to the second one, is that you are eligible to be inspected just by signing and submitting the application form. You signed that. If you decide that you don't want to register and you don't complete the process, you still could be randomly inspected or red flag inspected if there's a suspicion something might not quite be right with your grow site. So just keep that in mind. That is part of what you're signing when you're signing that application. And I just mentioned that we will be assigning just random inspections and we will be going back to some of the inspections that we did in 2020 as well as any other specific kind of red flag inspections. And we have people who are doing the water source, the water masters out there inspecting. So there are other people who deal with hemp. We have other law enforcement that might be checking in. So those are ways that other red flags might come up. So as long as you're doing everything that you need to be doing, you shouldn't need to worry about those. Our hemp inspectors this year will be carrying rapid sampling test kits that will let them know if there's an indication that the THC is above the 0.35 or higher. That will not be the final sample. It will just give us an indication of whether we need to do a full regulatory lab sample process. But we will be able to do this quick check to see where your crop is falling at the time of inspection as far as the THC levels. I also want to make sure everyone knows that although there are civil penalty maximum for violations, and we don't usually jump straight to civil penalty in violation cases, but we can if they're really egregious, it's $2,500 for each violation. So for example, if you harvested without sampling on 5 production areas that are registered at your grow site, that is a $12,500 max penalty just for that portion. If we also discovered that you weren't keeping your records right or there were other violations, then that number could go up. And one last mention that if you were inspected in 2020 under our random inspections, the case reviewers are still processing those inspections. So the inspectors went out, gathered the info, and then we have a group of case reviewers looking over and evaluating them. So it still might be a bit before you get the final notification on whether everything was clear or if you had any violations and what the next steps are for those violations. So that's all I have for our hemp inspection takeaways. I do want to remind everybody that this whole webinar is being recorded and will be on ODA's YouTube site. And then the mapping tool piece of it, the tutorial on mapping, we're going to try to either re-record that specifically or carve it out of this so that it can be put on our website for you to refer back to at the time that you're ready to do your mapping. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Beth. And I apologize, I didn't scroll down. I too am still learning all the technology. So we do have some mapping questions and we'll start with those and then we'll go back to the other questions that folks had submitted in the meantime. So can we still use Google Maps like last year and just manually mark the sites? This tool seems difficult to use. Also, do we need to identify other structures on site, such as a house?
For the first one, we really would prefer you to use this over Google Maps. We had a lot of problems that the Google Maps piece of it it's very hard for those to come across. If you're directly printing them and they show everything as clearly as I showed you in this tutorial using ours, you'll probably be okay. But with using Google Maps, so we aren't requiring that you use this. We're hoping that this makes the process easier, and I encourage you to at least try it because it's probably going to be easier than you think. I did really kind of spell out every little bit of these steps, but once you get the hang of it, it goes pretty quickly. I would like to make sure that you are getting the correct area and center lat long, which you should be able to on Google Maps if you're using the correct, pointing and clicking the right ways. This lat long comes out directly in decimal degrees, where it was like a 4 point the rest of the number. We just want to make sure if you're using other mapping systems, you don't put any other format of lat long on your application except the decimal degrees. And can you remind me what the second part of that question was, Sunny?
Yes, but while you're talking about lat long, somebody said that they didn't see you show how to get those numbers.
Oh, that was an oversight. I am so sorry. I only did the area. Let's go back. Pop open the measurement tool. This is going to be very simple. You're going to go to this third icon, and as soon as you click wherever here in the middle of baseball 1 and you click down, it freezes it. Wherever your cursor is what the top line is, so it's going to keep changing as long as I'm moving my cursor around the map. So it's this bottom one. After you've clicked and a little pin is dropped, then all you need to do is copy and paste these values into your latitude and longitude, and you can repeat that for each of the production areas. Thank you so much for pointing out my oversight, because that's an important piece. And while we've got this open, let me pop that back open. I can just point out the format of decimal degrees, and this does let you either have degrees or degree minute seconds, so you want to make sure that it defaults to degrees, so you shouldn't have any problem, but make sure it does say degrees when you use this to take the reading. So to go back to the first one, please try the map before you go to a different option. It'll make a much cleaner map, and it's just a lot more likely that your application will sail on through without needing to get more feedback from you, because that's where we got that 80% error rate, is just not just maps, but so many different little ways that you can not quite get all the information we need to us the first time around. This will improve your chances. It'll happen the first time around.
Thank you, Beth. And the other part of that question was, do we need to identify other structures on site, such as a house?
No, you don't need to. If you're only required to outline the production areas themselves and outline the grow site. If you feel like it might be helpful in reference, you can, but you don't need to.
Okay. What if while mapping I forget to change from acres to square feet?
Well, you'll probably get a really large error, so you'll just need to you'll get a large number. It'll be thousands when you know that you only have a 10-acre field. It'll come out in much higher than that in square feet. So let's go back to that measurement tool and look at. So if we do another outline, I'll just kind of outline this whole area. If you were intending to outline acres here, it would be 28. If you chose square feet, look how, it's going to be kind of obviously if you misdo a field and put it in square feet. If you're actually mapping out your greenhouse, and you're supposed to be mapping it in square feet, but you put acres, you're going to get something pretty tiny. Oh, I've got to close this again. I'm not happy with the way that's working.
It looks like it's once you've drawn that polygon, it's pretty easy to switch between those unit measurements. So if you
Yeah.
inadvertently drew it with the incorrect one, you could just switch it to the other and get the appropriate numbers.
And these aren't being labeled or anything. You're just taking this value and recording it. So before you move it from here to your application, just check that that right unit is showing before you copy and paste the value that you got.
Perfect. How much detail do you want on a map? Do we need to zoom in close enough so you can read the street names?
No, we just need enough detail to see where your production areas are in relation to its surrounding environment. I wouldn't probably zoom out on the map that I did as an example any further than I did. Then these little greenhouses are getting, it's kind of harder to see where they are. I would keep it there. If you've got a big enough screen that you could zoom in this far and the whole map would show, then that would probably be a little better. But as long as you can see in relation to the entire property where those production areas are falling and we can tell what names they are, then you're fine.
Okay. I don't think I'm this computer savvy or have the skills to do all these steps. Do you have someone in the agency to help me get a map of my property like this? This is better than the one I have.
I think that our registration specialists may be able to help walk you through this the first time if needed. I'm not going to make that promise until I understand what kind of workload that they're going to be having as registrations come in. But I definitely will be available, if not immediately, within a day if the registration specialist can't help you directly. So if they can't, they will forward your request to me and I'll definitely help you through it.
Okay. Assuming the maps won't be completely up to date with land clearing, new buildings, new growing areas, is it best to generally estimate the size?
Yes, it is. You'd be surprised that even if the land hasn't been cleared, that you'll start to pick up some key landmarks and you should be able to get a pretty close estimate. But I've definitely seen maps where, it's an open area and now when you're drawing it out and then it's a greenhouse when you're actually doing your grow. So you just have to use your best guess there. Put it in relation to what you do know as best as you can.
Okay.
If you let me add to that really quick, Sunny. If you know, for example, if you're talking about indoor grows and you know exactly how big that is, then when you're drawing your line, see what you get the first time around and then adjust the size so it more closely matches to what the square footage to be.
Okay. Inspection question for you, Beth. Mm-hmm. When are the inspections completed? After pre-harvest samples and before harvest?
They can happen anytime. They can happen near the beginning. They could happen in the middle of the growing season. They could happen at harvest time, and they can happen after harvest. There are a number of things that the inspectors are looking for besides just what's growing there. So obviously, if you haven't grown or you've already harvested and your material has already been sold, we won't be doing a rapid sample test of that material. But if there is any material on site, we will. If you have harvested but can't show us the results, which is another part of the inspection, is record keeping and seeing that you've kept all the necessary records for a grower, then there could be some issues with violations. But we might even kind of follow, if you're chosen for a random inspection, we might start out, because we want to be used as an educational tool, not just an enforcement tool here. So we might meet up with you, see your grow site, come back later in the growing season, then check back in with you at harvest time. So an inspection might be more than one visit.
Okay. So if we could get Tristan and Arden back on. While they're doing that, we did have a note from a county planner asking that we remind growers that hoop houses are considered structures and often require land use permits. So you need to be in contact with those county planners or city, depending on where your property is located, there may be hoops you have to jump through, hoop houses, get it, that are outside of the hemp registration process. There was another question about background checks. I'll take that one. Oregon has pulled back their state plan submission with the USDA, so there are no background checks required for the 2021 applications. So Rebecca, don't worry about that for 2021 yet. Just follow our hemp email listserv, and we will keep you updated as we move forward on that process. Okay. Can all applications and forms be submitted via email besides credit card info?
No, so the registration process really starts in our licensing department. So that secure fax line, they need a copy of your application in order to assign you a registration number and get, they need the information as well as the hemp program. So it has to go through them.
Okay. Do we need a handler license if we're making hemp products from hemp extracts?
So I guess a common thing that people do, I can give an example, is like drinks. So if you're purchasing hemp extract from someone that's like an end product that you can prove is under 0.3 THC, you wouldn't necessarily need a handler registration to make that product, but you would need to get that product tested after the fact to show that the end product is under that amount, as well as if you are making items for human consumption, you will need a food safety license from the ODA as well. So if you're making, edibles or anything that is intended for humans to consume, then you should contact the food safety program.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate to folks, at its most simplest form, the handler is the initial processor. So they're taking in that raw plant material and turning it into something else. Once it's something else, you may not need any further registration with ODA. And if you're working with OLCC, they may have different rules. Talk to us about that offline. That's separate from ODA's requirements. Okay, Arden, you suggested that if the grow site is contiguous, it can be included on a single grower application. If this is the case, how do we add the second address?
So I'm just going to address this. 2020 was really difficult we thought that using addresses for grow sites would be much simpler than it turned out to be. We thought it would be an equitable way to do registrations, but it turns out that a lot of grow sites, a lot of farm areas, they tend to have multiple addresses. So it turned out to be a little more complicated. So we're allowing for multiple addresses as long as the grow site is contiguous. So if you have, 500 acres and you have multiple addresses, as long as it's all contiguous, it can be one application.
And so just put the one address on and don't worry about that second address. Okay.
Yeah. The address that is, I guess use the address that is the closest to the center of your site.
Or if you were to use one of those addresses as your mailing address, maybe. Okay. Next question. I run extraction at one location, then make hemp products at another. Do I need 2 different luxes or 2 different applications?
So if you are every address that you're processing at will need a lux. Yes. Especially, I just want to mention too that you can go to your local, you should probably ask them, ask your planning department, find out your zoning and what activities you're doing, because just because the ODA doesn't necessarily require that does not mean that they do not require, that your local government does not require it as well. What comes to mind is, manufacturing pre-rolls or or packaging, using kind of plastic packaging and stuff. Typically, they care about those things.
Right, but if I remember correctly, ODA would certainly require a application for the extraction site, but not necessarily for the site where they're taking that extract and using it as an ingredient in other products.
Right.
Okay.
All right. I think my answer might have been confusing. I was trying to give more information.
Always good. So a handler can provide trimming for non-hemp like high THC. And I'm not sure what that question means personally. So Mr. Chin, if you're still on listening, if you could provide us some clarification on that one, I think we'll come back to that. Can multiple pre-harvest sample reports be completed on production areas to allow the harvest to be delayed? For example, if initial tests show very low THC content and we want to plant the plant to grow to maturity, can a supplemental pre-harvest test be completed? Of course, assuming all pre-harvest tests pass.
So I guess the main point is that you need to make sure that you harvest that area, at least starting your harvest within 28 days from a compliance pre-harvest test. So if you want to run maybe research tests all the way up until that point, that's fine. But once you get that compliance test, you're required to harvest it. Does that answer your question? Hopefully.
Yeah. I think too, ODA doesn't have the time to keep receiving a pre-harvest test report for the same field. Like if we receive 10 of those, then we're going to start to question, do you have 10 different harvest lots that you're assigned to that? But if you do a compliance test early and you realize like, ooh, I really messed up on that and I need to leave that crop in the field, reach out to Emily and talk to her so that she knows and so the inspectors know what's going on. But otherwise, you can do as many personal tests as you want leading up to that compliance test. And then another question about growers and dryers. If the drying machine is owned by a separate entity, but only does drying for the single grower, the company that owns the dryer doesn't need a handler's registration, correct?
So you need a handler's registration if you're using your dryer to dry other people's hemp. So when you produce your own hemp, you, as a grower, you are permitted to dry it. If you have a drying machine and you want to dry for other growers, then you would need the handlers.
What if I wanted to come use your dryer, Arden? I'm a grower and I want to just bring it over and dry it on your property, but I'm the one that's going to be running it and you're not taking possession of it. Do you need to have a handler or can I do that with my grower?
So Sunny, you want to use my dryer. I think that I would need a handler's.
Okay. So if you get into one of those situations like that, Jillian, sorry, I think that the ultimate answer is you probably should call Salem and talk to us and let us work through your individual situation, because there may be other extenuating pieces that we aren't able to answer in this format here today in a webinar. Okay. So I'm sorry, I think Mr. Chin is not still on. I'm still not sure about this trimming for non-hemp like high THC. I would just reiterate that we cannot, the hemp program is different than the marijuana program in that we don't allow growers to do trimming into retail ready product, which means we also don't allow for mobile trimming companies like you would see in the marijuana program. So this is different, and if you have more detailed questions about that, feel free to give us a call and we can walk you through your individual situation. For those of you that stuck it out with us, we really appreciate it. I know we went a little bit over, but I think we had good information, and we hope that you have a wonderful weekend and wonderful holidays for whatever holidays that you're celebrating. So with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.